Detroit Lions head into the 2025 offseason very disappointed after one of the best regular seasons the franchises had ever seen. Now, Brian and I, we are going to break down what you can expect the team to do and potentially improve on to get back to this amazing season that they had, potentially make a deeper playoff push this time. But before we get into that, if you like the content that the Tracy Take puts out and you want to help the channel grow, easiest way is hitting that subscribe button, tackling that bell to get notified for when new videos come out. While you're at it, leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you want to see the teams do this offseason and why. And Ryan, yeah, we were talking about this right before. We are typically very excited to do, videos and content, and engage with the fans, from each team. This was one that, especially too, also being a Falcons fan, and I, not to like obviously compare, I guess Falcons franchises woes versus Lions franchise woes, because I think y'all's are worse. But I understand the feeling that it sucks, especially to the Falcons in the early 2010s. We had Matt Ryan in his prime, and we had a couple of those years we were the number one seed, and we ended up just losing the divisional round or losing the championship game, or then obviously then when we finally make it to the Super Bowl, then we all know what happens from there. And so it's a tough feeling, especially too for especially like teams like with franchises like Ryan, like for you all, like I know we joke about all the time being a Patriots fan. You're starting to go through it a little bit with how bad the Patriots have been, but it's tough when your team's been so bad for decades. And then this happens. And so
Yeah.
'cause this Lions team was so much fun to watch. It's like this offense was so dynamic with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they were finally utilizing Jameson Williams in such a great way. Then you had the rise of Tim Patrick. That was a super cool story as well after other injuries he's had. This defense was amazing, and then they kept battling injuries, and then they kept being more amazing. But unfortunately, it's like to the bitter end. It's like it felt like every game there was like a major defensive injury. And Ryan is constantly kind of looking back at it. I think that's just what it was. Like, I just
Yeah.
think eventually they just ran into the perfect situation where the Commanders played a perfect game and the Lions didn't play their best game. And then they just didn't have the defensive weapons to slow down that rushing attack of Washington.
Yeah, well, they kind of ran out of options too, and like they just didn't have any other looks that they could give, and then at a certain point, they just were helpless at that point. But it was after like their two of their four top defensive linemen went out, multiple secondary members had gone out, multiple members of the linebacking group had gone out. So it was just a really really rough season for the Detroit Lions, and uh, it it's really really sad because this team was they had one of the best coaching staffs in the league. They had probably personnel wise the best roster in the league, and for a large majority of the season they were playing the best football in the league. And for them to make an early exit from the playoffs is definitely a little heartbreaking. But
Well,
I'm,
and also to add on to that, the season that could have been. Aidan
oh yeah,
Hutchinson through 5 games, 7.5 sacks. The season that could have been. What's the single sack? Uh,
it's like 23, I think.
yeah, I think Strahan at 22 and a half.
22 and a
Uh,
half. Yeah.
TJ Watt and Michael Strahan have it tied.
Mhm.
And man, he would have had a lot of opportunities. Well, shoot, through
Oh
15 games, on that pace, through 15 games, he would have broken it. Like, and with the
yeah.
way this defense was clicking, with how explosive this offense was, they would have been up in probably every game. Like, he would have been able to pin his ears back. And Aleem McNeil is awesome. They have DJ Reader as well. Trade for Zadarius Smith, I think, paid off well. It's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but uh, there's so many other guys here. Uh, Al-Qaeda Muhammad was another guy that ended up getting hurt as well. There's a lot of guys. Marcus Davenport that there's free agent signed. James Houston, Efide Melf. My apologies.
Ifeatu
And
Melifonwu.
yeah, absolutely. Alex Anzalone, he broke his arm, then he came back in the playoffs actually even. And
Yeah.
so just so many guys that are studs that just kept getting hurt. And there's a
Yeah.
bunch of guys that I'm even missing on this as well. So uh I think it's gonna be interesting then here as well, because so they're gonna have a lot of free agents. And also too, they lost Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn and a couple other guys as well, like assistant coaches that have moved on, like Antoine Randall. He followed Ben Johnson to the Chicago Bears. But they have
Terrell
found their
Williams went to the Patriots. Like
yeah.
they lost a lot on this coaching staff. A lot
Yeah.
of brain drain.
They did bring in John Morton, who was the passing game coordinator for the Denver Broncos, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And then they also promoted Kelvin Shepard, who was a linebackers coach
Mhm.
for the defense. And to me, it's very interesting on because a lot of these names I think were guys that they just signed, like they were free agent guys that like they signed on Tuesday, then these guys were suiting up on Sunday, like to play. But there's a couple of key guys to me here who I think they need to re-sign. And going into this offseason as of right now, they do actually have a lot of cap, above average amount of cap. According to over the cap as of right now, they're sitting at about 46 and a half million in cap space. That might fluctuate. It's still something that needs to be official. But this is as of January 29th. So they could go re-sign Kevin Zeitler if they want. I think you go re-sign Tim Patrick. I think he's a Dan Campbell guy. I think he fits in really well into what they were doing offensively with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. He's kind of that just consistent receiver that you're looking for, while Jameson Williams is a speedster and Amon-Ra St. Brown is your every down possession guy. Okay, I have to ask, what are you chuckling at over there?
The Dan Skipper left tackle wide receiver.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's going to be a guy,
Yeah.
very versatile player for Detroit. He can play offensive line. He can go out. Him and Panay Sewell are almost interchangeable with their receiving capabilities.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you laughed at that. I think he's a guy you want to bring back because I think he also just kind of fits
Oh,
that
yeah.
Dan Campbell mold. There's a lot of these guys here I think they could bring back, and it's going to be very interesting too with uh, some areas that they need to address on this team. This is like the strength I think of this draft. And so, want to throw it over to you. I've
Yeah.
been talking a lot. Want to throw it over to you. What do you think are some of the key free agents that they need to go after, and some other potential team needs outside of the interior and the trenches?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me, like you kind of touched on, I think keeping that offensive line group intact is going to be really important. And then in the draft, you can kind of supplement some later round picks, and maybe those guys develop to fill their spots later on. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to kind of see what they do. They have a lot of guys that are free agents, but a lot of rotational pieces and like very few like consistent impact players, I think, at the top. So they would definitely prioritize those guys there. And I do think like they spent a lot on the secondary last year. And so I am curious to kind of see if they invest in it again. I do think that might be well advised for them, like because the secondary was better, but it was by no means like near the top of the league. And so you're gonna count on guys like Terry and Arnold to develop. But if Carlton
Yeah,
Davis leaves, you could go and get another like CB2 in this free agency class, or maybe draft a guy like Maxwell Hairston, Trey Amos on day two. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what they go and do there in that aspect of
yeah.
the draft.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, like they were 30th when it came like to passing yards allowed. I think that's very weighted though. Or sorry, not weighted. A giant asterisk next to it though
Yeah.
is they were ahead in a bunch of these games.
Yeah.
They did actually, even throughout everything, still had, I guess, besides their final game, but had a very dominant rushing defense. But I also think one of the things, though, too, is like when Aidan Hutchinson went down, that was also like their primary sack leader. He still leads the team in sacks,
Yeah.
and he only played in 5 games, and he had 7.5 on the season. And so I think there was more pressure put on the secondary as well as the season
Yeah.
went on with all the injuries that they had. And so, but to your point, though, yes, I think that could be something that they want to let Carlton Davis go, which I hope he's okay because out of all the injuries, he's the one he broke his jaw. Like, God,
Yeah.
that's
That
painful.
that's a crazy clip. Like I believe he's coming across the field and like he just like gets hit like perfectly on the chin strap and like
Yeah,
his jaw just breaks. That
yeah.
sounds really painful there. But
There are some. I will say it's not only then too were like all the injuries that happen, but just the nastiness of these. Like
well,
I'm pretty sure. I even think too. I think it was Amik Robertson who broke his arm in the playoff. Did you see that video? Like just like it's like so you have the broken
yeah,
jaw. You have his. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Amik Robinson. You obviously have Aidan Hutchinson
that's how
leg
Alex
injury.
Anzalone broke his arm too. He broke it at
Yeah,
the elbow when reaching his arm in for a tackle. Who was the corner that was going across the field and he banged shins with the other
I
corner,
I know who you're talking
and
about.
and his leg broke also. Like it was just
Well, and even think
week after
too.
week.
Well, and even think too how wild these injuries are. Like we're able to, we just specifically went
Mm,
through 5 or 6. Like
yeah,
this is just the type of season the Lions had, and
yeah,
so it's so unfortunate that it ended this way. But I think there's still a lot of good that can come out of it. Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, I understand. Like you got to go when the timing's right. Like they got to go do their careers. I think they did a
mhm.
bunch of great things for Detroit, for the city. I will say that before we even get into this, and I really admire Dan Campbell. I would play for him in a heartbeat. My 1 year of Pee Wee football. If Dan, if you need a guy, give me a call. I'll suit up. I won't be able to do much of anything, but like I'll run through a brick wall. I mean, you hear some of these speeches.
Well,
I'd
you'll
love to
run
play
into a
for this.
brick wall.
I'll run into a brick wall. Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, unless if it's the thinnest, it's one of those like kid brick walls, where it's cardboard. I could run
Yeah,
through that one.
yeah, it's like
But
those karate boards that they have people chop that are just
yeah,
are made to be broken, like, with, like,
exactly.
pre-cuts and stuff, yeah.
Exactly. So I say all this, and I have a feeling I, we're really going to find out how good of a head coach he is, because Ben Johnson was clearly the one obviously running the offense. I feel very confident. I think Aaron Glenn was the one that's primarily running the defense. So now you're bringing on Kelvin Shepard, so that continuity is going to be on the defensive side of the ball, but you are going to have a new guy coming in on the offensive side of the ball. It feels very eerily similar to kind of like Nick Sirianni with the Eagles after Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen left, where I think we're really going to find out how good of a head coach he is. Can he put himself into that upper echelon now, or is he an amazing leader among men? But like, are they not going to be able to re-sign the right guys, and they're not going to have the same success? Because obviously, I think the Lions, it's expected they're going to regress this year. Going 15-2 this
Yeah.
season is an amazing season.
Well,
It's so. But it's like I hate saying that about Dan Campbell because he's just so fun to watch and you want to root for the guy. But if we're talking about it from a business standpoint, though, we're really going to learn a lot about his grasp on the team because the main core group of guys, I'm pretty sure Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Antoine Randall, the gentleman that you said that went to the Patriots, I forget his
Terrell
name,
Williams.
Terrell Williams. I'm pretty sure they've all been there from when like they sucked. Like when they were like 1-15
Yeah,
or like 3-13, like that first year after the Jared Goff trade. So
yeah.
I think we're going to learn a lot about his coaching style and how far he can really take a team.
Yeah, and that to me, I think we talked a little bit about this. You mentioned the Eagles, and that was gonna be my kind of closing point, but we'll talk about it now. Um,
Oh, sorry, my bad.
we no, 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 you're good, you're good. We have never seen a team go to the Super Bowl and then lose both coordinators. It's happened like 4 or 5 times in history where a team has gone to the Super Bowl, uh, lost both coordinators the ensuing offseason, and like the teams have never returned. And so, one, the window there's a limited window with your coordinators, because if you have a Super Bowl caliber offense and defense like the Lions did, most likely your coaches are going to get poached in that offseason.
Yeah,
And that's a good problem to have. That means you're performing at a really high level, but that brain drain is real, and it takes time for guys in those positions to come in and fill the shoes of the guys that were there before. And so it's going to be really tough, I think, for the Lions to come back. And I'm not saying like they're going to be a bad team, because they're still one of the most talented teams in the league, but that coaching and that like X factor that these coaches gave this team isn't going to be there anymore. And a lot of times in those one score games, that's really kind of what puts teams over the edge when talent is much more matched. And so I'm really curious to kind of see what happens here with Detroit and this coaching situation. Just to touch on this slide briefly, since we have it up, there are like a few free agent targets there. Kevin Zietler, to bring back, and also I'll put Dan Skipper in that category as well. If they want to continue to bolster that interior, though, there are some other options. Trey Smith is probably the top one on and at the guard position. Will Fries is another one from Indianapolis that I think would be a good fit, and then DJ Jones is another defensive interior guy that could be a decent fit, and then. Honestly, invest in those trenches in the draft. Gray Zabel has been the best offensive lineman
yeah,
at Mobile, and really not even close. And Tyler Booker is another really solid interior offensive lineman that they could go with. If Calvin Banks or one of those tackles falls to them at this point, and they want to kick them into guard, I think that's an interesting option there as well, because they're not going to be thrust into a starting spot right away. And this is a really deep defensive tackle class. Tyreek Williams, Kenneth Grant, I think are going to be near the top, like kind of in that second tier behind Mason Graham, who's going to be a top 8 pick at worst. And so I think getting one of those guys in there that can kind of continue to hold their own there in the middle and allow these edge rushers to really get after it, I think is going to be key. But they have a decent bit of draft capital. They don't have a third round pick. Originally, they have a projected third round comp pick right now. So this could be a potential trade back spot here at 28. But they're in a good spot. And the biggest thing though is just how does the brain drain affect this organization? They lost
Yeah.
2 really crucial coordinators, and can Dan Campbell come in and replace them right away and get guys that can be as effective, which is going to be hard to do. But and then can Dan Campbell also kind of help fill in those areas as well? Has he learned enough in his time as head coach over Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn to help fill in for some of the knowledge loss?
I will say I think it's great that Kelvin Shepherd is staying in. As you just go look at his coaching experience and also the compliments that people have been saying about him is just his overall intelligence and being a linebackers while being a linebackers coach. I think there's going to be some pretty consistent continuity there compared to if you got an outside defensive coordinator with a whole new ideology.
Yeah.
That being said, though, it's still going to be I think his first time being a coordinator. Like a defensive coordinator. So we'll have to see how he calls games. Offensively, though, I think they might take a step back. It's Ben Johnson had just such a creative mind. So, and for John Morton, it's going to be interesting to see the type of offense that he wants to go in and run. But that being said, though, they still have one of the better offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in the league when healthy. Still going to have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the backfield. Jared Goff is, I think, a top 10 quarterback in the league still, especially too, like when you put him with all the good pieces around him and with that protection. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams going to keep on developing. Maybe that could be like a sneaky area that they go and get is like see if they can get another receiver that just to have another option as well, even if they re-sign Tim Patrick. But they have all the weapons offensively there to kind of embrace, I think, a new system. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see what they end up bringing here. I'm rooting for that. If it's not the Falcons, I want to see Detroit or Buffalo. Those are kind of my 2 teams. Sorry, I know you're a Patriots fan, but those are kind of my 2 pseudo teams. Just want to be kind of rooting for those guys and those franchises for them to meet in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I mean Detroit's definitely a really easy team to get behind. Buffalo is for that matter also. As much as it pains me to say, but no, I still feel like this is going to be a team that we're going to be talking about as a potential Super Bowl contender, especially if all the pieces can kind of come into place. And I mean honestly, like I think the example that Lions fans should be hoping for is like a Joe Brady in Buffalo situation. He was an offensive assistant. Ken Dorsey got fired midseason. Joe Brady came in and really had that, or well, I guess the season's over for them, but really had that offense playing at a high level in his season and a half as OC. And he's a really young head coaching candidate. So I think that's going to be interesting to kind of see what happens with these young coordinators, and I think that's really going to sway Detroit's future success. So we went a little bit long on this video, so let's wrap it up here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you thought of the Lions 2024 season and what do you want to see them do in the 2025 offseason. Let us know what you think about their coordinator hires, and other than that, we will see you guys next time.